Queen of the White Wolves. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I like your stories about werewolves admitting the truth about themselves. I can relate, you see, and I'd like to share my story with you as well. See, for some decades I ran as queen of a white werewolf pack. I mean white fur, in case you were thinking something else. They were blonde, I was blonde, and we fit together for a really long time. This started when I was young, back in the 70s. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, but this is not going to be a Wisconsin werewolf story. I was working in a diner when this fancy city boy started talking me up. Apparently he was discovering me. That's what he kept saying. I lived pretty far from Hollywood, and I didn't really believe too much what this guy said. I was a pretty girl, and my dad taught me to never believe anything that any guy ever said to me, unless he could prove it. Dad said men instinctively lie to pretty girls, so it was my job to learn to be a detective of life, you know? To do my own research, and figure out for myself what's true, and what's some guy trying to get me in bed. It's probably good advice for you, too, even if you aren't blonde and 19. At any rate, this guy was a photographer, and he paid cash in advance for photo shoots. He promised me no nudity, and so I took his money. It was getting paid to just stand there. That was how I felt about it. As I got to trust him more, we started taking day trips to locations so that he could get different kinds of backgrounds. I thought he was using these for art shows or something. I was only dimly interested in his discussions about his business. It turned out these images were being used in advertising. In the major cities, people were becoming familiar with my face, but since none of the ads reached small-town America where I lived, I didn't find out about any of this till many years later. This situation wasn't to last very long, though, because that photographer and I were about to hop into a small personal airplane and fly straight into the side of a mountain. Now, there's a range of mountains in northern Alaska that this guy decided he needed to get me on top of for a photo shoot. Now, the idea that he and this other guy thought they could land their plane on top of a mountain indicates how good the cocaine was back in the 70s, because there's no way we could have done that. The place they wanted to take photos from was in the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve. Maybe we could have gotten there by helicopter, but it was so windy up there and so dangerous flying close to the mountains that I'm not even sure we could have done it that way. And as I already said, what happened was we slammed right into the side of one of those mountains, and we fell to the ground hard. I assume both men died, while I lay there, bleeding out, and getting ready to meet my maker. Some white wolves with beautiful glowing eyes came to me, and they began to lick at my wounds. I thought they were drinking my blood. I mean, I suppose they were, but I expected them to start eating me alive at any moment, and I mercifully passed out from the fear. When I woke up, I wondered if I had died, and if this were heaven or hell. I seemed to be inside a cavernous space, and my wounds seemed to have been cleaned. I was no longer bleeding, but I felt dizzy when I would try to sit up, so I stopped trying to sit up. When I laid back down, I could tell that I was on soft white fur. I remembered the white wolves then, who had licked my body wounds. This fur I was lying on was that same kind of fur as those wolves had. I fell in and out of sleep for some time. I couldn't know how long. It might have been hours, or days, or weeks. I don't have any way of telling. Months, possibly, or minutes, maybe. There weren't just the white wolves there. I remembered silhouettes that more closely resembled humans. I remember finally waking up feeling very hungry, and I was brought some meat soup by a boy and an old man, who introduced themselves and asked my name. I honestly couldn't remember my name in that moment, which sounds weird and dramatic. No, I didn't have amnesia like on a soap opera. Or maybe I sort of did, but it was only in the first 15 or 20 minutes as I was getting food in my belly and waking up for real. that my memories were in a haze. When I didn't immediately give them my name, the two decided I would be called the Fair One, and that sort of became my embarrassing nickname. I was treated like an honored guest by these two, and as I ate and drank their simple fare, I began to remember who I was, how the plane had crashed, and the strange way I came to be where I was. I started feeling panicked, and I asked the old man to please tell me where he found me, and if there were any other survivors. He told me that the man who found me was out hunting, and when he returned, he would explain everything over dinner. That was my first sense that I was not alone with these two. I think I had thought that they were also shipwrecked or lost, but instead they seemed to be part of a larger group. I wondered why they chose to live in a cave, but I needed to sleep after eating, and so my questions had to wait till later. The next time I woke up, a dog was licking my face and making me giggle. I opened my eyes and was somewhat surprised and frightened to see that it was a white wolf that was in front of me. Possibly one of the ones I saw lapping up my blood from my wounds back at the crash site. I went from full relaxation to my heart beating faster than a Keith Moon drum solo, and I thought I was about to experience some terribly painful things, to put it mildly. The white wolf reared up on its hind legs and seemed to grow in front of my eyes. I screamed and thought I was losing my mind, but I saw the dog turn into, well, it's hard to describe what it turned into, 'cause it wasn't a man, but it wasn't a dog anymore either. It was humanoid, and it stood on its hind legs. I won't call it an upright walking canid though, which is a term I've heard on the internet. It had a dog shape when down on all fours, but it looked like a dog-headed man when it was standing up like that. I felt like I was seeing things, and that someone was trying to trick me, or play head games with me or something like that. When the dog-headed man began struggling to speak to me in a version of English, I wanted to scream and run out of there. I wasn't really strong enough to stand, let alone run away, and I had no idea where I would be running to inside this guy's cave. I was pretty much at his mercy in that moment, at every succeeding moment, until I got my legs under me again. So I tried very hard to understand the words he was trying to speak to me. Soon the human boy from earlier came along and translated for me. Like he told me that I was laying on the pelt of a former leader of the tribe, and this was intended by them as a show of great honor. It was too cold where they lived for the fur to be buried on the person, so it was kept and held sacred instead. Once I began to understand the large white-furred wolfman's accent, as well as his speech impediment brought about by not actually having a human mouth, I began to understand his meaning better. Soon, we needed no translator at all, but I'll get to that part when it comes up later. So this big muscular white-furred guy starts telling me in his way how he found me and the two others. The men were already lost, but he started licking my wounds, trying to bring me back. When he told me that his saliva had the power to heal, I nodded as if I believed him. In actuality, I just thought he was a simple half-human. I was humoring him. When he told me that I would soon become like him, and that I would be strong enough to run with his pack, I had to stifle a giggle. He was very cute with his Tarzan act, but I was a woman of the 20th century, and I hoped I could get my job at the diner back now that my photographer employer had moved on to the other side. I had no plans of running with this guy's dog pack, but when I tried to tell him that in a polite way, it was his turn to stifle a chuckle. When you change for the first time, he said, I will try to be there to help you through it. My sister will be there in either case. Leader brought his sister around, who I also called Sister. Everyone seemed to call her that. She began to help me exercise a few times a day, and she tried to warn me about how I would begin to change, but I didn't really listen to her for some reason. I had seen a wolf become a wolf man, but I didn't really believe him when he said that I would become a wolf woman. Sister told me that she and Leader were from a line of wolves who got transformed into werewolves. They had no human forms, only werewolf and canine. Sister said that I would be living between human and wolf woman forms, but I would not likely ever fully transform into a wolf as she was able to do. This was all amusing to me at the time, and I continued to humor my rescuers, somehow thinking that I understood the world better than they did. Of course, people wouldn't have wasted their time warning me if nothing was going to happen, so I just wasn't being logical. I guess it was too big a thing to wrap my mind around at the time. But then, of course, came the day that I finally began to physically change. Even if I had taken the warnings seriously, I couldn't have prepared for what happened. I didn't take them seriously, though, and so I was completely knocked for a loop when my actual appearance started to change. I know I was technically a model, but I think I had worked as a waitress longer than as a photographer's model, and I don't think I was any more vain about my appearance than any other young woman from my generation. But to feel your face, and to know that it's changing shape, this is a really upsetting thing to have happen to you. I've listened to programs on your channel where werewolves describe their ears changing first. With me, it was the nose. The end of it sort of turned up, and I could see it happening right in front of my eyes. After the end turned up, it turned darker and leathery, and a little fine fur or downy hair started popping out all over my face, a very light platinum blonde hair. Now this might be a secret, or it might have been back then, but I was not a natural platinum blonde. I was naturally a person with light brown hair, and in some light my eyebrows didn't look too dark, so I wasn't as obvious about it as some, but I was not a natural blonde. The fur growing out of my face was naturally very, very pale blonde though, which made no sense to me when it was first happening. I'll cut to the chase and explain that mystery right off the bat by telling you that I am a natural blonde now. I haven't dyed my hair since before I got into that photographer's friend's plane on that day. Something about the transformation turned me blonde all over, and a very pale shade of it too. So as I was panicking, Sister showed up with Leader, and I began yelling at him. I accused him of turning me into an ugly monster, and I called him sick and evil. He took my insults without getting angry, then explained to me that I was dying from my wounds when he found me. When he licked my wounds, the natural curative agents in his saliva healed my wounds, thus beginning my first stage of recovery from the accident. I had internal injuries too, and it wasn't quite as simple as all that, but because I had been contacted internally by his bodily fluids, my body began to have what he called an anti-disease. Now I doubt that's an actual word or a term, but his meaning was clear. I now had a condition whereby my metabolism had become able to speed up its healing repairs of my body, both on the outside and on the inside. Now the rough part about all of this is that these healing effects are a side effect of becoming a werewolf, a hybrid kind of creature between humans and wolves. I was no longer who I had always been. I was now painfully and agonizingly becoming someone entirely new. I did not fully transform that first night, nor in that first week. Leader said he'd never seen someone take so long to fully change, and he worried that my system wasn't strong enough to be a werewolf. But it did eventually happen, and once it did, I tried to remain in that form whenever I could, at least during the first month or two. It was the strength and the power I had never felt anything like those in my life. I could suddenly run faster than any human. I was suddenly stronger than the strongest man. I had never fantasized about power or speed. But once I had them, I got drunk on them. The first time I joined the men on the hunt, the females regarded me strangely. I reacted differently to the change than any female they had ever seen. I reminded them that most of the females they knew started off canine and not human. I had never before had permission to chase animals. I never had been told that it would be alright to leap on the back of a fleeing deer, to drink the blood of my prey, to be more savage than the devil himself. I went insane with it at first, causing the females to fear me, and the men to all respect and desire me. When I say men, of course, in this context, I mean animals. Animals like what I had become. Animals like what I now enjoyed being. After some moons had come and gone, the leader took me as his wife, and I retired from the hunt. It would be my job to lead the pack in leader's absence, and we couldn't both place our lives at risk at once on the hunt. Twice a year, though, I was still allowed out under the moon to chase and to kill and to eat. Leader stayed home on those nights because, as I said, we couldn't both place our lives at risk at the same time. I lost track of the years as we measured time differently in the pack, but it was the year 2006 when a traveler happened upon our cave and spotted me. A human traveler, I mean. I did not know that 30 years had passed since I joined the wolves, and apparently nature didn't either. I still looked the same as I had when I first arrived, and this man was quite handsome. We soon started talking. I was in my human form, but kind of embarrassed to be wearing rags as I was. The man told me he could bring me back to civilization and that we should get going. I of course was torn, and so I brought him back into the cave to meet the pack. Leader was of course most upset about the prospect of me leaving. The traveler agreed to stay for dinner and to leave the next day, whether it be with me or without. Leader and I discussed the situation, and since he was such an honest beast, he told me that it was only our werewolf forms who were married. It would be wrong for an animal and a human to marry, obviously, so when I was in my human form, and when he was in his wolf form, we were both free of our commitments to each other. Therefore, if I wanted to return to the human world, I was free to do so. The thing of it was, once I left sight of the cave entrance, there was next to no chance that I would ever find my way back. I had to make up my mind to stay or to leave, but in either case, the decision was going to be a permanent one. I missed the human world very badly, though, and so the next morning, I said goodbye to my family. They treated me as queen of their pack, and yet for some reason, I missed television, and I missed Burger King. Well, once we hit a First Nations settlement on the way south toward rescue, and I first saw human beings again, I felt something different. I no longer felt that I was one of the White Wolves. I think I'm trying to say that I was somehow human again. I mean, my hair stayed blonde, but I began to age. Once I was away from those people, I discovered that I soon began to look as old as I should have been looking all along. That traveler rescued a woman who looked like a teenage model. The woman he later turned over to the medical unit for examination was judged to be in her late 40s, which was my true age by that point. Now I live back in the United States, near the town I grew up in Wisconsin. I married my old high school boyfriend, but he had a violence problem, so that didn't last long. I have to work 2 crappy jobs, but I still can't seem to cover my bills. And my back is aching, but I can't afford to see a doctor. They fired all the smart doctors anyway, so if I had stayed with the werewolves, I'd have someone to rub my back if it hurt. Who am I kidding? My back would heal if I threw it out up there. I should have turned around and headed back to that cave when I still knew how to find it. It's too late now. I left behind the life I was meant to lead. I left behind the family who cared about me. I left behind my friends, and I left behind a man who loved me more than any man in this world is ever going to. And so I write this email to you in order to keep Leader and Sister and the others alive in my heart a little while longer. I wish I could return to them and remain forever young in the hidden cave in the mountains. I wish I could once more be Queen of the White Wolves. Whether you drive on Firestone or BF Goodrich, you gotta say thanks to old Butch Rudrich. Please join me in thanking Butch Rudrich for rejoining our channel memberships. It's great to see so many of our old members returning and donating to keep the channel alive. Here to explain the cool perks you can get in return for joining one of our clubs is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.